The penthouse shimmered with glass and gold, but the air inside felt cold. The billionaire sat at his breakfast table scrolling through his phone, barely glancing up as his maid placed a cup of coffee before him, when she accidentally spilled a few drops on the marble. His tone cut through the silence like a blade. "Useless," he snapped. "Can't you even handle a cup of coffee, right?" She froze, eyes wide with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir, it won't happen again." He scoffed, shaking his head. "You people never learn, do you?" The maid lowered her gaze and quietly wiped the spill. Her hands trembled, but she said nothing. Years of working under him had taught her that silence was safer than dignity. He stood grabbing his jacket as he muttered under his breath, "Maybe if you spent less time staring out the window and more time doing your job, you'd actually be worth what I pay you." She looked up just once, her eyes glimmering with something he couldn't name, before whispering softly, "Sir, may I say something?" He sighed, irritated. "What could you possibly say that matters?" She hesitated, her voice steady but calm. "You should be careful how you speak to people. You never know who they truly are." He frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer, just turned back to her work. And that single moment unsettled him more than her mistake did. Later that afternoon, his phone buzzed. A call from his father's lawyer. "Sir, we need to meet immediately. It's regarding your family estate." He frowned. Impatiently, "Fine, schedule it." When he arrived at the lawyer's office, his world tilted. The same maid he had mocked stood there beside the lawyer, calm, collected, with papers in her hand. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Sir, this may come as a surprise, but your late father appointed her as a beneficiary of his will." The billionaire stared at her, his jaw slack, his mind refusing to understand. The maid stood quietly, her uniform pressed her expression calm. The lawyer continued reading from the papers. "Your father's will names Ms. Grace Turner as co-beneficiary to the Hale estate and assigns her temporary control over all charitable divisions of the company." The billionaire's voice cracked through the silence. "What kind of joke is this?" "She's my maid." The lawyer met his glare evenly. "No, sir, she isn't, just as your father wasn't the man you thought he was. He left a letter for you." The billionaire snatched the envelope from the desk, tearing it open. His father's handwriting stared back. "At him, son, I built my empire on the backs of people you now look down on. I hired Grace years ago, not because I needed a maid, but because I needed you to see her. If you could treat her with respect, you'd prove to me you had learned what true leadership means. If not, she would inherit what compassion demands." His hands shook as he read every word. The room seemed to spin. He looked up at Grace, her calm face now filled with quiet sadness. "You knew?" he asked hoarsely. She nodded. "Yes, your father told me to stay until you learned the difference between power and worth." He sank into the nearest chair, rubbing his forehead. "I treated you terribly." She walked closer, her tone soft but firm. "You treated everyone terribly, sir. I just happened to stay long enough to show you who you were becoming." Her words were gentle yet heavy like truth itself. He swallowed hard, guilt clawing at his chest. For the first time in his life, the empire he ruled felt smaller than the heart of the woman standing before him. The billionaire's voice trembled as he finally met her eyes. "You could have told me all along who you were, why you were here, why you stayed." She shook her head slowly. "No, sir, you wouldn't have listened. You had to see yourself first. Not through a mirror, but through the way you treated those you thought were beneath you." He looked down, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "You think I can change after everything I said? After how I treated you?" Grace's expression softened. "I don't think. I know you can, because your father believed it, and because I've seen it in moments when you didn't know anyone was watching. When you helped that old security guard, when you paid for your driver's sick wife, you hide decency behind pride. But it's still there." The billionaire's chest ached, her words cutting deeper than scolding ever could. He glanced at the lawyer, who watched silently before speaking. "Your father left one last clause in his will. Mr. Hale, the charitable branches of your company will remain under Ms. Turner's leadership until she believes you have earned the right to take them back." He blinked, startled, looking back at her. "You decide when I'm ready." She nodded quietly. "Your father said, compassion must be Tested, not inherited. He leaned back, his face pale, the weight of his own arrogance pressing against him like gravity. He whispered, "I don't know if I can ever deserve forgiveness." Grace stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Forgiveness isn't deserved. Sir, it's chosen. And I'm choosing to believe you'll find your way." The lawyer closed the folder quietly as the billionaire sat in silence, the empire he had once built on pride, now cracking open just enough for humility to take root. ChatGPT said days later, the penthouse no longer echoed with orders or anger. The billionaire sat by the window staring out at the skyline that once made him feel invincible. The silence around him felt heavier than ever, but this time it wasn't loneliness. There was reflection. He had spent his life measuring worth in numbers, yet one maid's truth had shattered every illusion he built. When the door opened softly, Grace stepped in, dressed not in her uniform, but in a simple white blouse and dark skirt. He carried no fear in her steps, only calm strength. He stood quickly, unsure how to speak. "What do you say to the person who showed you the worst in yourself and didn't walk away?" He swallowed hard. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know. I've started something. A new foundation in my father's name, one that helps workers and families like the ones I've ignored all these years." She blinked surprise, softening her features. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I have been many things, Grace, but I won't let arrogant be the last of them." She smiled faintly for the first time in years, her voice warm. "That's the man your father hoped you'd become." He took a deep breath, eyes glistening. "Thank you for staying when you didn't have to." She shook her head. "No, sir, thank your father. He knew you needed breaking before you could truly build anything that mattered." He looked down at his hands, calloused, not from labor, but from learning humility at last. For the first time, the empire he ruled didn't feel like his greatest achievement. His change did. If this story moved, you share it so others never forget that one selfless act can rewrite a destiny in ways no one sees coming.